Ashes and Roses. In the shadows of Brookside, Marcus Ash Delgado was a ghost with a name. A thief with precision, cold eyes, and a reputation for leaving nothing behind, not even a trace of regret. His life had been a string of scores, backroom deals, and closed doors. Love, trust, peace, those were fairy tales. Until the day he ducked into the Violet Press to hide from a cop tailing him through the rain. Behind the counter stood Clara. She looked up from her book, eyes calm, lips curling into a soft smile. "You look like someone who needs a good story." Ash raised an eyebrow. "You got any about disappearing without a trace?" She tilted her head. "Plenty. But I recommend starting with Dorian Gray. You strike me as someone haunted by mirrors." He cracked the faintest smile. No one ever spoke to him like that. He bought the book just to keep the conversation going. The next day, he came back. And again. And again. She started saving him titles. Leaving notes in the margins. Sometimes they'd talk for an hour, their conversations drifting from philosophy to childhood memories to things left unsaid. One quiet evening, Ash leaned on the counter, flipping through a novel she'd recommended. "You always this trusting with strangers?" Clara didn't look up. "Only with the ones pretending they're not looking for hope." He stared at her for a long moment. "And what makes you think I'm one of those?" "Because every time you read something that hits too close, you stop reading and start frowning." Ash chuckled, shaking his head. "You watch too closely." She smiled. "And you hide too well." It was slow, but something was changing. He began to crave her presence, not out of need, but because being near her made him feel like someone worth saving. One rainy afternoon, Clara found him fixing a broken shelf in the back. "You know," she said, wiping dust from a box, "you've been here so often, should start paying you." Ash looked over his shoulder. "That's the first time anyone's ever offered to pay me for doing something honest." She gave him a look, that soft, curious gaze that always cut deeper than it should. "What did people usually pay you for?" He hesitated. "Things I'm not proud of." Her voice didn't change. "But you're here now." And for Ash, that meant everything. But the past doesn't stay quiet. One night, his burner phone rang. Jax, an old crew leader, slick and vicious. "One last score, Ash. High-end vault. In and out. You say no, I tell your little bookshop girl who you really are." Ash's chest tightened. He'd been here before, cornered, threatened, teeth gritted in silence. The next day, Clara noticed the difference. "You look like someone who just lost a fight," she said gently. He didn't answer. That night, he knocked on her apartment door, soaked from the rain, eyes dark with something heavier than fear. "I need to tell you something," he said. She stepped aside. "Come in." He told her everything. The robberies. The aliases. The jobs. The deal he was offered. He didn't cry, he didn't know how, but his voice shook when he finally said, "I've never had anything to lose before you." Clara stood there, quiet for a long moment. Then, she stepped forward and took his hand. "You don't scare me, Marcus." "You should." "Why?" "Because you've done things you regret," she whispered. "You think love only finds the clean?" He looked away. "You deserve someone better." "No," she said. "I deserve someone real. And right now, that's you, standing in my doorway, finally choosing something different." So Ash made the call. He tipped off the cops. Set up Jax and the crew. Made sure the takedown was clean, airtight, and quiet. No one suspected he was the informant. He didn't need credit. He just needed peace. A few days later, Clara handed him a book, The Count of Monte Cristo. "You're not the same man who walked in here months ago," she said. But I think you were always meant to become this one. Ash opened the book, flipping through the pages slowly. He gets revenge, right? He also finds redemption. He looked up at her. Do I deserve that? I think you're already on the way. They built a life together after that, slowly, quietly, but fiercely. Ash worked at the bookstore full-time. Sometimes he'd read aloud to her after hours. Sometimes she'd fall asleep beside him with a book in her lap. He still had nightmares. Guilt doesn't disappear overnight. But Clara never flinched. And he never ran again. Every morning, they opened the shop together, a thief turned caretaker, and the girl who believed in stories. And every time he looked at her, he knew. He had finally found the only thing he'd never stolen, love. It had been almost 2 years since Ash left the shadows behind. The bookstore had become more than a business, it was home. The worn bell above the door chimed with familiar comfort, and the creaky wooden floor was a rhythm to their daily dance. Clara still caught him reading poetry when he thought no one was looking. And he still caught her watching him like she never stopped believing in who he could become. But Ash had never been good with words, not the ones that mattered. So for weeks, he carried a small velvet box in the inside pocket of his coat, the weight of it growing heavier with every day he didn't ask the question. One chilly evening, Clara was closing the register, humming something soft and tuneless. The sky outside had gone a deep violet, and the shop's windows glowed warm against the cold. Ash was pretending to organize the poetry section, again. His hands hovered over a volume of Neruda's love poems, fingers tracing the faded cover. "You're quiet tonight," Clara said, glancing over her shoulder. "That usually means you're either plotting something or writing a novel in your head." He smiled faintly. "Maybe a little of both." She walked toward him, wiping her hands on her apron. "You okay?" Ash took a slow breath and nodded, though his heart was thudding like it used to before a heist, except this time, he wasn't afraid of being caught. He was afraid of what he might lose if he didn't speak. "Remember when you told me some stories don't need rewriting, just a better ending?" he asked. Clara tilted her head, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "I remember." He reached into his coat and pulled out the box, not with grand theatrics, just a quiet reverence. He opened it and held it out between them. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, nothing flashy. Just honest. Clara's breath caught. Ash looked into her eyes, more vulnerable than he had ever allowed himself to be. "I don't have a perfect past," he said. "And I still have days where I wonder if I'm dreaming all this, this shop, a life that feels real. But what I know for sure is, I want my future to be with you. Every chapter. Every storm. Every quiet morning." He swallowed, then added in a rough whisper, "Marry me, Clara." For a long second, she didn't move. Then her eyes welled with tears, not from surprise, but from recognition. She had always seen this in him, even when he didn't. She reached out, took the box gently, and looked up at him with a radiant, tearful smile. "Of course, Marcus." "Yes." Ash let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. She leaned forward, and he met her halfway. Their kiss was slow, deep, and filled with the weight of everything they'd overcome, and the hope of everything they were building. Later that night, they sat curled up on the old couch in the back of the store, the ring glinting softly on Clara's finger as they read from the same book, one of her favorites. Ash rested his head against hers, the world quiet around them. He had once been a man with nothing but shadows behind him. Now, he had light. He had love. He had her. And the story was just beginning.